Good day, friends. My name is Luke Beer. I am the president of this brilliant Rotary Club, the Rotary Club DuPont Circle. I'm so glad you could join us today. We have some great friends zoomed in from down south, me out in the West Coast, and then, of course, our cluster of colleagues back in the DMV area. At this point in time, I would ask my colleague Gabby to read the mission statement of the club.
We use our professional diversity and international perspective to serve our community, both local and global, in concrete ways through hard work, innovation, and creativity. The synergy of the club lets us have a higher impact on the world than possible as an individual while enriching us through fellowship.
Outstanding. Thank you, Gabby. And now I'd act, because this is a happy hour club, we always try to enjoy a toast. Area Governor Mandy, can you please lead this club in a toast?
Great. I am toasting to reconnections. I feel like the weather is beautiful. People are actually going out and doing stuff. We had our beautiful Rotary training on Saturday. I got to see a whole lot of people that I have not seen in years. We have Gabby joining us after she just got married. I am going to go to the international conference in June and see people that I haven't seen in person in years. So I just feel like it's, I don't know, the sun is shining. So cheers to reconnecting.
Cheers. Absolutely. Now, at this point, we normally read all of our club news. I just want to say a couple of things. Primarily, we just had the district awards received, and our club received 4 awards, including our first ever gold, at least since I've been a member of this club, and that was in club excellence. So it's a great reminder that we're putting the right foot forward. We worked from a strategic plan from the beginning of the year. We tried to cover as many bases as we could of what good Rotary clubs do in our district. And secondly, we put out good messaging. Our Rotary Club received a silver medal for public relations. And then after that, we received a bronze medal for membership, as well as a bronze medal for the environment, which is great because that's a new award for our club. I had it in our strategic plan that I wanted 2 silvers at least, but I think the gold, or sorry, 3 silvers at least, but I think the gold's going to count for a little bit heavier than just silvers. So that's makes me very proud as this club president. Thank you everyone that's helped and supported us. Sending emails, reaching out to colleagues, making sure that our programming was always interesting, and reaching out to new members and people that are considering joining the club. That's just outstanding. Past that, I mentioned to Mandy earlier, I was donating blood today over at the Red Cross, and I just want to remind everyone, if that was your habit before the pandemic, they are very excited to see you and get back into donating in your past probably cycle. And if you haven't given blood lately, I know I'm getting emails all the time. It's certainly very important. And with that, I'm going to move to our colleague Howard, who's going to be introducing our speaker today. Dr. Diana, please, Howard.
Hello, everyone. I have the distinct honor of introducing my sister, Dr. Diana Bien-Aimee Garrett. Dr. Diana Bien-Aimee Garrett is the CEO, president of DAB Inc. Publishing. Dr. Garrett earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Relations at the University of Florida and a Master of Science degree in Organizational Communication at Baylor University in Miami, Florida. While in graduate school, she conducted research on intercultural communication issues for Black women in corporate America, and on the motivating factors for employees in the profit and nonprofit sectors using organizational communication paradigms. In 2017, Dr. Garrett earned her doctorate degree from Baylor University. As an associate professor of communication, she has held multiple academic administrative roles in higher education, including department chairperson, associate academic dean, and academic dean. She continues to have a passionate advocacy for the infusion of communicative theory in the teaching and learning processes. Before Dr. Garrett's success as Miss Black South Florida 2007, she published The Lady of God in her 20s, a collection of candid and colorful Christian poetry that offers her musings on spirituality and womanhood. Her most recent publication is The Lady of God in Her 30s. Dr. Garrett is also a proud member of the Links Incorporated and Alpha Kappa Psi Sorority Incorporated. You guys, here is my sister, Diana Bienemy Garrett.
Yay! Thank you, BJ. I know you all call
You're
him
welcome.
we call him BJ. So thank you, brother, for that warm
You're
and
welcome.
wonderful introduction. I first just want to congratulate your club on all of the recognitions and to also celebrate the reconnection that Mandy mentioned. What I'd like to do today, BJ mentioned a little bit of that in what he was able to read, but I thoroughly have a passion for this teaching and learning process. And over the years, I just realized it is sort of preparing for today that I have been in higher education for almost 17 years. I don't know if that's dating me any, but for over 17 years, I've been in higher education, and we just continue to have the same conversations about student success and how do we get our students to come in, have an enriching experience, eventually leave us, and then go on and do great things on their journey. And so with that, the way that I want to sort of go through our conversation today is to pose 8 questions to you that I have posed to myself. And as I'm answering those questions based on my history and some of the work that I've done, perhaps you can become very reflective on some of those questions. And then that can sort of facilitate our conversation after I've shared a little bit. That sound good? Okay, everybody's on mute. Okay, all right, so with that, I have these 8 questions that I have asked myself over the years, which leads to where I am now. I'm at Georgia State University. I am assistant professor there, and I am currently on our DEI team. I'm also on a learning community committee for cultural relevant pedagogy, and I'll explain what that is as we get into our conversations. But the first question I wanted to pose to myself and also to you is how reflective or self-reflective am I when it comes to conversations regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion? How self-reflective, aware, self-awareness, how much of that do I have when I begin to get into that conversation? And the reason why I ask that question is because a lot of what we feel when we hear those 3 letters, we can either get really excited and motivated to effectuate change, or we can get completely terrified. And the reason why I say that is because prior to moving to Georgia and being at Georgia State University, I am coming from Florida. So I am essentially, my experiences are essentially from 2 very conservative states when it comes to education. And we have a lot of conversation about how faculty are concerned about their academic freedom and what that means when they begin to infuse DEI practices. What does that mean? How is the governor concerned about that? And this is specifically in the state of Georgia. So I'm saying that to say for myself, I recognize that I get really excited and motivated about conversations regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion because of my personal experiences. And so when I say self-reflective, what is my current positioning, my current framing when I hear those 3 words, and how does that frame inform how I react to it or how I am responsive to it? And for me, my reactions come from a lot of the experiences I had in undergrad. As an undergraduate student at the University of Florida, public relations was my major. I realized very quickly that I felt internally that perhaps I didn't belong because I, of course, am minority woman at a predominantly white institution, these large classes. A lot of people didn't look like me, and I'm talking about race, but I'm eventually going to get into culture in a minute. So being at this very large institution, I had to sort of accommodate or try my best to sort of fit into the experiences that I had. And one of the most prominent memories that I have when I reflect on why it is, and I'm so motivated when it comes to conversations about DEI, is I went to the University of Florida in the early 2000s. So I'm not dating myself too much, but in the early 2000s, that was the very first year in the history of the University of Florida where we had 1 African-American male and 1 Hispanic male actually running for student government presidency. And during that year, I was actually what did we call it back then? We call it the chair of of students taking action against racism. And that essentially was one of the cabinets within student government that was there to aid or to create dialogue and conversations for students of color and beyond, for the entire institution when we talk about race relations. So the night before we actually had the voting process, we had two buildings on campus. One was entitled the Institute of Black Culture, and the other one was La Casita. Both of those were instituted to create spaces of comfort for students of color once they're on the campus. So the night before we had elections, somebody spray painted something very offensive. And I'll say this because we're a small group and we've been, sure you've all had conversations about race and culture in the past couple of years, but somebody spray painted that they did not want the N-word for a president on the IBC, the Institute of Black Culture. And then someone spray painted, we don't want the S word for presidency on the Hispanic, the La Casita, the Hispanic space of gathering. And I remember feeling as though this cannot be real in early 2000s, right? This is something that I sort of imagined would be happening to my grandparents, if that parents perhaps, coming from a Haitian background. But it was something happening during my time, very real in undergrad. And here it is, I'm supposed to be the person that makes a statement to the news, to our institution, creating a speak out to allow students to share their opinions. And I was terrified, but at the same time, I was motivated because I knew that there was something about this, as I've just shared the story with you, that just did not resonate, didn't make sense for where we thought we were in terms of being progressive. And so I'm sharing that story with you because it stayed with me. So not only did the experiences from the classroom setting stay with me, the experiences outside of the classroom also stuck with me over the years. And that became an inspiration for me to get into higher education. My background is in communications, but I thought I'm really passionate about sharing, helping others express what it is that their truth may be, and allowing for spaces for that truth to emerge, however it will emerge. And what better place to think that it might exist, but in the classroom, which in fact isn't always the case. So I decided to go forward and get my dissertation. And my dissertation was centered around how do we create spaces for dialogue that honors the student's voice in the classroom as related to what I do as a faculty member. Just try to make it simplistic. As a faculty member, what do I do to honor what students are bringing into the classroom culturally, which also includes race, gender, all those things? How do I create a space for dialogue to enhance the teaching and learning experience? And so with that, I took that information and I sort of flipped it, because most times when we talk about doing a study on student success and what it is that we can do to enhance those graduation rates, it's often from the student perspective. The students say that they're having a wonderful experience or a not so wonderful experience, but we never really take a look at what the faculty are doing to create those wonderful experiences. And so I'm going to go into some of the things that we've done historically when we talk about structures or patterns to create some form of success in terms of graduation, but never really taking a look at how I, as a faculty member, bring into the classroom something that will allow the student to feel empowered, something that will allow the student's voice to feel empowered so that they feel that they have the efficacy or the ability to finish, to graduate. So with that, I took that information and I say, you know what, I'm going to apply it at my institution in Miami. I'm going to apply it at my institution in Georgia. And what I found is that one of the questions that I had to ask myself is, if I'm following my passions, how do I allow myself to follow those passions with the spirit of inclusivity that will allow all those that I really want to influence? How will I allow all those, regardless of race, regardless of culture, all those things? How do I include, how do I create inclusivity with this passion that I have? And that's why I opened up with a question of being self-reflective, is because sometimes I can get so passionate that I forget my audience. So something that it should be so second nature we often overlook because of what we've done historically in certain entities or contexts. And I think right before we started our meeting, Mandy was talking about, I think you all had 62 different clubs and the processes that took place to make things change. You can imagine those same things happen in terms of bureaucracy in higher education. So with that, in my experience of being at the institution in Miami, I recognized that there were many, many things that we were doing historically that we thought were going to increase our graduation rates. Now, I want to tell you that I think nationally, our graduation rates across the country, it's at 33%. Georgia State now is at 51%, and my former institution is right at 33% in terms of graduation rates. And when we talk about student success at an institution of higher learning, it's really about, did you graduate? Because many of them stay with us beyond 4 years and they don't earn a degree. So it's good that you are persisting, but are you actually completing? And so a lot of the conversations I had as faculty, as chair, as dean, we had these huge town hall meetings. We would invite everyone from every discipline. We would discuss, how we were going to have onboarding structures, how we were going to have multiple advisement sessions for our students, how it was that we were going to introduce this idea of mentorship or summer programs. And with all of those wonderful ideas that we constructed in all of those town hall meetings, not once did we have a student in the room. Now, I started at my first institution in 2002 as adjunct, 2005 full-time faculty going into tenureship. Never had a student in the room as we were making all of these plans. And so what I had to ask myself was, because I had earned my, at that time I had my master's degree in organizational communications, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I can't be tied to an institution that has practices that doesn't prioritize the population that I say that I have pledged myself to serving passionately. And so that became the impetus for earning my dissertation and then getting involved in administration and really trying to effectuate some type of change that honors the student voice. So if we take a look at what we've done historically, we all know that we have depended very heavily on standardized testing. And it's not until this year, a couple of months ago, or was it last month, or whatever month it was, that we find that the institution that I'm at now, it's optional. Many institutions are now going to this optional phase, recognizing that there were many barriers to certain underserved or underprivileged individuals, most importantly, women or females or young ladies taking the SAT. And so with that said, it wasn't until 2022 that we're having a conversation about how we employ this idea of standardizing the learning process, or your ability to learn is actually a barrier to learning. So with that, I had to ask myself another question. How will I be tied to an institution, an organization that does or does not align with what I say I'm truly committed to? And if I am going to tie myself to that institution, how will I promise to effectuate some form of change? And so here we are today. When I look at, what we've done in the more recently, maybe in 2015, we started recognizing, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, maybe 2009, 2015 was, the same initiative, but on another level, started realizing that Black males are not doing well in, they're not graduating. Their success rates or their ability to earn their degree is really, low compared to the rates for that institution. So we're going to have a Black male initiative now. So that's what we're going to do this year or for that next year. So it almost seems as though every step of the way in terms of how we introduced any type of resolution to underrepresented populations in terms of their graduation rates was always structural and outside of the classroom. So for example, with the Black Male Initiative, it was, we're going to take young Black men and pair them with other Black men outside of the classroom and create some type of mentorship. But we didn't really recognize that when they go back into the classroom, there aren't many Black males as faculty. So not only is the representation not there that could lead to some form of relationship building, in order for there to be this idea that I am comfortable in this space and I have the ability to move forward in terms of success, in terms of building a relationship with my faculty member. But beyond that, I wanted to focus on culture in my dissertation, because there are many times where we can be part of a certain racial group, but not necessarily have the overlapping cultural experience. So a lot of my dissertation was, and I'll pose this to you, is how do you define culture? And for me, and this is the definition that I've always used, is culture is a set of beliefs, values, or attitudes that govern our behaviors. So what we recognize in the classroom is whether you're coming in as a Black male, Black woman, Hispanic, a student with a learning disability, there's so much diversity, but that diversity in terms of what we do as faculty is not always recognized and used as a tool to celebrate the learning process. And it becomes a little muddled. And so I've noticed that throughout my years, the only question I've ever posed to my students regarding diversity way back when was, do you think that this institution, which is a minority serving institution, do you think that this institution tolerates diversity or celebrates diversity? And their answer was, of course, we celebrate it. And I said, well, how is that? I said, well, we have Hispanic Heritage Month, we have Black History Month, we have the LGBTQ month and celebration for women. And I said, okay, well, raise your hand if you actually go to some of these events. And the hands were very minimal. So this idea of celebrating or really creating a space for us to engage, even though this is my perspective and my experience, even though we're doing a lot outside of the classroom to invite an appreciation of diversity and inclusion, a lot of that is not transferred into the classroom. And we can see that by the amount of students who are now very much engaged because of what's happened in the past couple of years. Thankful for that, even though it manifested in a way that was, horrific, but of course, eye-opening. We really haven't had that experience. And so this is my first time in so many years that I've seen institutions of higher education attempting to question what the culture is within that institution. You can say that you celebrate this particular group, but the evidence is in what happens after the fact. And we can erect as many buildings as we want. We can have as many conversations as we want outside of the classroom in terms of mentorship, but how does that translate into the learning process? So with that, I've studied, Hofstede is one of the authors that I studied for many years, and it's fluctuated for some time now. But if I were to ask you, what are some of your cultural influences that shape the way you perceive education for me, or whatever your context may be? What are some of those cultural influences? And if we're not self-reflective, and that's what I noticed for me, I can then become the perpetrator, the very person that says, I believe that we should honor the student's voice and what they're bringing to the classroom. So it's that self-reflection that allowed me to realize, well, wait a minute, you're not being as inclusive as you say you are, because culturally, in terms of how I was raised, in terms of, what I believed was education, was just the professor will tell me what to do. I will, as an educator, I give you the syllabi. I have these dates that you have to submit your assignments, and if they're late, I'm not taking them. These are the only assignments that we're going to give you, whether or not you're a tactile learner, a visual learner, whether you have another way of understanding this material. The way I set the agenda as a faculty member, I realized came a lot from what I had learned culturally. And so what was I going to do differently to create spaces for the student voice to become very real and very active? And I had to give them, and I'll give you a few of the things we've done. There's this universal learning design that we utilize, which says, regardless of what population you represent in the classroom, which by the way is another mistake we've made culturally. As faculty, we say, you know what, the culture is higher education. We're a homogenous group. When you come into my classroom, you're a student. When in fact, that's false, because that could be a student who's homeless and hungry, or that can be a student who's going through some type of abuse in the household. And if I'm not sensitive to that, if I don't create a space for dialogue to learn about how that impacts the students' learning in the classroom, then I feel like I failed, because that means that I have not done my job of informing myself of the population that I said that I serve and that I'm super passionate about. And so what I try to carry in terms of being self-reflective, and hopefully this will resonate with all of you, is this idea of practicing communicative competence. And that's essentially a very fancy word for saying, am I truly as competent or well-versed as I think I am when it comes to communicating what my intentions are? And communication, for purposes of our time together, I define it as the process of establishing shared meaning. So if I'm going through this process of trying to get my students, this is my context, you may have a context of your own based on your club. If I'm trying to get my students to understand that this is a safe space, your voice is powerful, your stories inform this learning process, but I don't create the space, I don't invite the dialogue because I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to hear what they have to say, I don't agree with what they say, then that, according to Habermas's theory, is not cultural competency. And what cultural competency does is it builds, it allows you to build that unity that's needed in terms of the teaching and learning process. So cultural competency is something that I often try to be self-reflective on. The second piece is this idea of culturally relevant pedagogy. So we got a little bit better historically when we said, okay, there are different learning styles. Got it. But with those different learning styles, that doesn't mean that the student just selects one. There could be multiple ways of understanding or demonstrating your understanding. So what I've tried to do now is, instead of saying, you know what, this is the only sole assignment that I'm going to give to you to demonstrate your understanding of this objective or this learning outcome, I'm going to let you feel empowered in your voice to tell me how best do you want to communicate your understanding of this particular objective. And of course, I'll lead them with some examples, but then they can get creative on me and say that this is what I'd rather do in order to demonstrate my understanding of this learning outcome or objective. So providing options through that cultural relevancy in terms of pedagogy and how we instruct, also trying to be universal in terms of empowering our students and how they learn, and then continuing to be self-reflective on if I'm really aligning myself with what I say that I'm committed to. So what I'd like to do now, because I feel like I've been talking like forever, is to kind of open it up to get your perspectives on just anything that resonated with you within your context based on what I've shared. And then we can go from there, because I really wanted to ask, and I already feel as though this club is doing a lot of that in terms of using creativity to, what were the words? Oh, to impact. I wrote the words down, to be impactful and to also fellowship, which sounds very much like communicative competency, but in another way. So I just want to stop there and just allow anyone to kind of share their reflections on personal experiences or where you now are as a club or an individual, so that we can start a conversation. Or questions.
So I always have thoughts. Sorry, guys, you get to hear me talk a lot. I wrote down something that you said earlier. What do I do to enhance the opinions that other people are bringing to the meeting? And I feel like, especially, I'm also in a district position where I interact with a lot of other clubs. Our club is really fun, and it's a bunch of people around my age, and we've got a nice mix of women and men, and like easy people to have a conversation with. But some other clubs, they don't have anyone in their club like younger than 70, and they don't have people in their club that feel like they were part of the vote to let women into Rotary in 1989. And so some of these old geezer clubs, as I'll call them for our conversation, they have said in the past, why can't we just kick the women out again and have this be our boys club again? And so I have to be, though, at a neutral position where I liked the enhancing opinions that other people are bringing to the meeting. I was like, I feel like I need to like write that next to my computer or something.
Yes, yes.
So that I don't like quick say what I think I should say to them, and it's not going to be nice.
But that's that awareness, right?
Yes.
So that's it. So, instead of us, this is me, and I try to do the same thing, is instead of being reactive, like, how could you? How could you not?
Like, well, we could just shut your club down then.
Right. Oh, well, you could. You could. But that self-reflective piece, which I think creates empathy, so that I'm not, like I said, I mentioned in higher education, if we've been doing it, having the same conversations, there's something about the individuals within the institution that somehow the way that there's cognitive dissonance to do anything other than what we've always done. And faculty are just that. And so my commitment to, as you're speaking about your commitment to the club, my commitment to higher education has been just that. It's that I'm not going to remain part of an entity without necessarily effectuating change if I truly say I'm passionate about it. But so thank you for sharing.
I have a quick question. I know like the change that you've spoken about, different like learning styles, doing things in like a new way. I was wondering, have you experienced a lot of pushback in your efforts to effectuate this change? And is pushback coming from, or the challenges coming from students or your peers, like fellow faculty or leadership of the university, like the more, the heads of the university? Like, what has been your experience with overcoming those challenges?
I love that question, Gabby. Let me tell you why. At my former institution, you had to pick a side. It was either you were administration or faculty. At my current institution, you are forever faculty and administration. And my experiences kind of led me to think faculty are always going to agree, even though it's going to take us a long time to get there. We're going to have those conversations. It's going to take a while, but we are collectively on the same page. So I am excited about being at my current institution because faculty from all disciplines are on board with this idea of looking at culturally relevant pedagogy. And now sorry about the train. I live next to a train station, so if you hear it, I apologize. Faculty are super excited. Administrators are super inquisitive. Like, what are you going to do? But we always fall back on this idea of academic freedom, which gives us the opportunity to explore, which is why I've always selected faculty over administration, because there are so many roadblocks, I think. But to answer your question, I know that was a long answer. I think the pushback, if any, would be outside my current institution, outside of administration, and more so what's happening with our governmental officials in terms of the fear of what does this mean? What does this new conversation translate into in terms of the traditional ways in which we're instructing our students?
I don't really have so much of a question, but more so of a comment on, I think that this conversation is not only relevant in like the classroom, but also in workspaces or organizational spaces, especially in our day and time where there's different sexes, there's different sexualities, races, and people are truly having the courage to be themselves. And there are people who are, I would say, a little bit conservative or old school, who are uncomfortable when these changes or these differences of pronouns come into play. And it's to the place of how do we get people to understand, but also appreciate other people's differences without blocking them out, making them feel uncomfortable. And that was a huge reason, or part of why I moved away from Tennessee, was because I was a Black gay male who also had ministry and licensure in ministry in a conservative city, who felt as if that I couldn't truly be myself. But I also knew that there were people that I were mentoring within that same city who were struggling. And I felt as if it was time for me to go away, for me to enter a new chapter of learning, adapting, but also appreciating the change of who I was becoming as a male. And I feel as if it's important that these conversations are held, even if it does make people uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, we all have to be in this space of difference of opinions, difference of colors of our skin, different sexualities. How can we be that true community and enriching each other and being the person that we want to be? So like, I think these conversations are very important and very relevant in today's society and moving forward as we all strive to go through this journey called life.
I agree, BJ. I absolutely agree. And I came into the conversation talking about higher education, but I think that is we are like the poster children. And I love higher education, but we are the poster children of doing the same things and expecting a different outcome. And I will say that, I mean, as brilliant as faculty are, and a lot of the research and the writing, it's again, I think we're missing on this constant self-reflection and the alignment. What I say I'm passionate about, or maybe not, but I know for me, it's what do I say I'm passionate about and how do I align myself with that in terms of what I do from day to day for students. And maybe sometimes there's a misalignment. We can say something in theory, but it becomes theory in action when we begin to do something about it. So I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad you took the opportunity, expanding.
Doctor, I was wondering what you do in your syllabus to try and encourage the things that you're talking about. Like, for example, if we were talking about capacities for learning, not everyone does well on a midterm, A, B, or C type of answer. Not many people might do well on, true or false, or, short answer questions. Could you kind of explain how maybe you go about creating that 100% mark? 20% for midterm, 40% for independent study, 40% final exam type thing. Because I agree with you that I very much want to see as many people graduate as possible. Naturally, we also want to see our own degrees maintain their stature, meaning that, you're hearing people, for example, complain about, they shouldn't write off student debt because I paid for my debt. Well, right. They shouldn't give out degrees just for anyone that pays tuition because I had to pay tuition. So could you speak to that to a degree? Because I think I have all kinds of time for what you've spoken about today, but I think I'd like to understand how you put it into practice.
Sure. So my choice is to focus on the learning outcomes. And so for whatever given course, we have identified 2 or 3 learning outcomes that we say, we want you to be at the proficiency level to demonstrate learning at the end of this course. Now, what proficiency looks like in terms of an assignment can be different items. And so what I try to do is I have a mix that focuses more on the demonstration of learning. So for example, my objective tests are the lowest in terms of percentage in terms of what that means to the student's final grade, the objective test. And that's just based on my philosophy that simply because you get the right answer doesn't necessarily demonstrate to me your understanding. And mind you, this is my discipline. My discipline is performance-based in terms of communications. So having the objective test, I think it's great for the students to have that theoretical perspective. And so, yes, if you do well on that, there are points provided for that. But then there are other assignments that are weighed more heavily, and those are the more creative assignments that gives them the opportunity to be empowered in terms of, for example, selecting a social issue, whether it's local, national, global, and then demonstrating or providing solutions to those issues, utilizing the framework that I provided to them. So they're learning the framework of how to formulate their voices around this communicative pattern, but they're the ones selecting what it is that they're going to focus on. So it comes from them passionately, and to me, it demonstrates learning. So those types of assignments will get the higher amount of points per se. And then of course, this idea of class participation, you know, we can define that in so many different ways, but being actively present and more forgiving of timelines. I think that's what I've done over the years, is that I've had brilliant students who've had issues at home that don't allow them, especially since the pandemic, they can do the work, but they get missing or they just drop off when the deadlines are there. But I will, if they communicate to me, we can extend those deadlines and still give you the point values that are there. So all in all, I try to give a mixture of assignments, weigh them differently based on what I feel demonstrates learning the more so. And before we get into these assignments, this idea of you telling me your understanding as current, when you first come into the classroom, what is your understanding of effective communication based on your cultural background? So we have a lot of conversations together collectively on that, so that I can value that and not say, well, that's not the correct way of expressing A, B, or C. Before we get into whatever my standards are, the goal is to calibrate at the beginning of the course, provide the instruction and the coursework, and then to allow that grading piece to be more so based on, did this student really demonstrate learning? And that's an issue, because we have a lot of students in the past couple of years coming into higher education where I don't know that there was a solid, authentic demonstration of learning. So there's a lot of catching up that takes place when they get to me, which is another conversation. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, for sure. I just think you've made it incredibly challenging for your own self, because it's easy to say that A was the right answer, or in your short answer of 6 sentences, you said that the Berlin conference happened in 1885 and it was hosted by, Chancellor Bismarck.
Yeah.
1.2.3 point.
Yep.
So I credit you with putting the work in. Definitely, that's incredible.
Yep.
Your students are blessed to have you. And I think I speak for most people who are successful in life. There was a great teacher in their life that made them feel valued, listened to them, helped them persevere through the challenging courses that maybe they weren't good at, reminded them that, they were skilled, knowledgeable, and thoughtful and intelligent. So thank you for putting in the work. You could just put it through a Scantron and say the answer was A, B, C, D for 1, 2, and 6.
So, a lot of that is being challenged now, just to give you some of those special topics or issues in higher education is just that, especially with online learning. It almost feels like distance learning. Like we just, faculty are sending the packets, give me the packet back, I'll scan it, we'll go through the Scantrons and provide you a grade. I think that that's at the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy in terms of learning. So I try to stay away from that. But that is a major conversation, particularly with more students choosing online learning, is how is that engagement taking place? So.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Incredible amount of food for thought here tonight. I mean, this is, again, why I'm a member of this club, because we don't just have someone telling a life story. It's challenging our membership, not just a listen experience. So thank you very much. You've given, again, lots of us to think about. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and the honor. Thank you all.
Awesome. Unless there's another question for Dr. Diana, I think I'm going to let her go.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Diana.
Bye. Thank you.